How's it going? You know, in all the time I spent in India and the many travels that I went to India, learning this magnificent instrument from the great Ravi Shankar, I also picked up some great recipes from the subcontinent. None as good as ground up greens and cheese, also known as
Palak Paneer. In order to make Palak Paneer, you'll need an 8-ounce package of paneer cheese, 1 pound of frozen spinach, either leaf or chopped, 2 to 4 tablespoons of ghee, a quarter can of coconut milk, 1/2 to 1 cup of heavy whipping cream, 2 to 3 large onions, preferably yellow sweet such as Vandalia, 4 to 6 cloves of garlic, 2 cubes of peeled fresh ginger, 1-inch cubes, this is what we're talking about. A Fresno or jalapeno pepper. The Fresnos are kind of like red jalapeno peppers. A quarter pound, which is 1 stick of unsalted butter, plus a couple other tablespoons of butter. 2 teaspoons of cumin seed unground, 1 teaspoon of ground turmeric, 1 teaspoon of chili powder, a 1/2 teaspoon of a spice called fenugreek seed, which is ground, and that's optional. You can get that at like an Asian specialty store. 3/4 teaspoon of ground coriander, a 1/3 teaspoon of ground cumin, and 2 teaspoons of garam masala. You'll also probably need to have a good sized food processor to do this dish.
Okay, we're going to get the paneer cheese ready here. The thing about this dish, that the spinach and paneer, it's so good, is that the paneer cheese is cut into cubes and then cooked, browned on all the sides that you can in a non-stick pan with some oil. So we're going to cut them into cubes. It's a fairly dry cheese. You should be able to get this at most decent stores. If you can't, a farmer's cheese might work pretty well as a substitute. This is the size of the cube I use. Sometimes they go bigger. I went smaller this time and cubed them up, and I'm using the whole 8 ounces of paneer cheese, so 1 package. I've got a pan set to medium, and I'm going to put in just a little bit of oil, not a lot, just enough to cover it. You can see because it's a hot pan, it's spreading pretty fast. You don't want it to get too hot. Now the cheese goes in. You have to be very careful with this cheese. It's got moisture in it. The oil is going to pop, and it'll dance around, and you could get a pop in your face. So just be aware that's the case. You want to get them covered. You want to keep these things moving and flipping the whole time. See that? They brown very fast, and stand away, be prepared for popping. But you want to keep this thing moving and keep turning so you can get all the sides brown. Probably takes about, I'd say 2 to 3 minutes tops. Again, temperature, medium. The key to doing this quickly is to start with a pan that is hot. So get the pan preheated and then add that oil in. You don't need a lot of oil. And then you just keep working this like this, turning it, and you'll get a quick brown, and it allows you to stand here with a non-stick pan, absolutely a non-stick pan. You'd probably get away maybe with a good cast iron pan. Keep it rotating. When we're about there, I think that we're about ready to take this off. And we'll put this on a plate, it'll cool, and it'll be ready for when the rest of our dish is ready. For the spinach paneer dish, you start out with, you get 2 really big onions, or maybe 3 medium-sized onions, and yellow onions are about the best, and if you get Vandalia onions or sweet onions, that's even better, because what we're going to do is we're going to slowly caramelize sliced onions in butter.
Vandalias are seasonal.
There you have it. You can only get them when?
Spring.
Spring, okay. Well, these are standard yellows here. Obviously, you peel the yellow onions, cut them in half, and man, these are strong. They're going to make me cry. And then keep your fingers away and You want to have pretty thin slices. You're going to slice all these up, and then they're going to go in a pan with the butter. About like that. So you could use salted butter, but you should use unsalted butter. And I recently found out why. This is just the salt. Unsalted butter, because it has less milk solids, clarifies better for this kind of cooking. And you see those bubbles there? That's basically the water in the butter coming out. And we want to wait till that basically stops, because it's not going to reach anything more than what? 100 degrees C, 212, until the water boils off of it. But you want to make sure you're not cooking this too high. Maybe low to medium, because you don't want to scorch the butter. Once the bubbling is almost stopped, then you can put the onions in. Okay, the bubbling is almost stopped. You start to see that the brown bits in there. Keeping our temperature below medium for sure. We're going to put in our sliced onions now. Oh, man. So they're all going to have to go in there. I'm going to have to put them on. Now we've got our onions in there. We're going to give this a nice turn. Get all the surfaces covered with. So remember, this is about a stick of butter. And so we got everything in there. Kind of get some pieces of onion. We want to kind of break it up a little bit. And now what we're going to do is we're going to turn this on to medium, low, or medium. Probably keep it on the low side. We want to cook this really slowly for about 15 minutes. And we're going to keep stirring it periodically. It's going to start cooking down first, and then it's going to get brown, and then deep brown, and that's what we want. That's the caramelization. And that caramelization makes it sweet, and that's a really critical part of this dish. Don't rush this. This is what makes it or breaks it. The onions have been sauteing slowly in the butter for about 9 minutes now. They got a little bit of time to go. See, they're getting golden. You don't want them to get burned, but you want them to slowly evolve into that beautiful dark thing. And if you have to cook them longer than that, go ahead and do that, because I mean, this is really the critical part of this thing, is to get that sweetness out there. So we're starting to get there. You can see the caramelization on the onions really going down inside that golden brown color. You want to be stirring this quite frequently here so you don't get anything to burn. And you want to turn the temperature down when you get here, because we're getting to the place where we're starting to get the sugar starting to brown here. Boy, this is delicious. All right, this is what this looks like. It's about 18 minutes, cooking very slowly. Now I'm going to add in a chopped up red Fresno pepper. You could use a jalapeno too, but red Fresno pepper gives it color. I seeded it a little bit. There's still some seeds. And then also a chopped 1 clove of garlic. Drop that into there like that. Give it a stir. That pepper could probably chop it a little more, but that's okay. All this is going to eventually get curried anyway. So what we're trying to do here is just to release the garlic and the pepper here into the butter. Now I'm going to turn the heat off on that and just let it set for a bit. So a common ingredient in many Indian foods is a mixture of garlic and ginger. And what we're going to do here is put this in the food processor. And I'm kind of making a double batch here because I'm going to be using it for 2 dishes. But for the paneer cheese dish, spinach paneer cheese dish, you need about that much ground ginger, maybe a little bit less, which is probably about an inch of this stuff, maybe a little more, and it's grated. And then you put some peeled garlic and you put it in the food processor. And then you're going to add, here, put a little more of this stuff in there. We're going to add a little bit of water to this. Now, the amount of water is depending on whether or not I can get a up here. Probably just a couple of tablespoons, but that's too much. About that much, not much more, because we're going to make it as a paste. So I'm going to get this going here. We need a little more water to spin, I think. Well, yeah, a little bit more water. I'll have to scrape on the side, but what we're trying to get is a paste. That's not too bad. So there's the consistency. That's not too bad. It's pasty. That's what we're going to use. Well, there's our paste. It doesn't look like it's in focus very well, does it? And if you couldn't do that, or if you didn't have the food processor, you could go to the grocery store, and in the produce section, you can get these tubes of ginger and garlic, and you can just mix those together. Those are already in a paste, and that would work okay too. Okay, for the paneer spinach dish, actually, it doesn't have to be spinach, although I usually use spinach, but I like to use a combination of different kinds of greens. So here I've got mustard greens, fresh, and collard greens, fresh. And I'm going to also use spinach. I'm going to chop this up. You could also use dandelion greens. Sometimes you can find them in the store. Kale, although kale is a little less flavorful. Chard is another one. Any of these stronger green flavors, you just chop them up and then you wilt them and cook them a little bit. You can get these in the frozen section too. So, for example, Cub Food might have those. I prefer the fresh to frozen, but it's up to you. So if you're going to be cooking Indian food, get some ghee. This can of ghee, which is basically clarified butter, is about $11, but it goes a long way. And what's nice about clarified butter is it has a much higher temperature than regular butter, and it's used a lot in Indian cooking. So we're going to use it as the fat base to wilt our greens. So I've got 2 tablespoons of ghee melting here on medium heat. And before it gets too hot, I'm going to add 2 tablespoons of this garlic and ginger mixture. I don't want to get it too hot yet because otherwise it'll splatter all over. It'll be high moisture. There we go. Now, what we're going to also do is we're going to add a whole bunch of spices to them, and I've got them laid out here. We've got cumin seed, 2 teaspoons, 1 teaspoon of turmeric, 1 teaspoon of chili pepper, about a half a teaspoon of funguinic, which I happen to have, but you don't need to have that. And then 3/4 teaspoon each of coriander and cumin. And that's all going to go in there. And then we'll start putting in a little at a time because it'll wilt. A lot of moisture in there. Hear the popping? That means you stay away until things cool out. So I'm going to get this wilting. Stir it in there. Oh, look at that. Yummy. Yum, yum, yum. Turn the temperature down to kind of medium-low. You don't have to chop this up fine because all of this is eventually going to go into the food processor. But what you want to do is be able to put it in so that you can start to get it to wilt. So you're going to, this stuff will just reduce in volume hugely once it starts wilting. And then the last thing we'll add in is the frozen spinach. So we're going to get this wilting, and then we'll add frozen spinach in. When you're using fresh greens, you go, oh God, that's a huge amount, but it wilts down a lot. You can see those collard greens and the mustard greens have wilted down just about to nothing, and I'm going to add in a pound of frozen spinach now. And I'm not going to drain this because I want to have that liquid in there. I'm going to let this cook for about 3 or 4 minutes to make sure everything, because it was partially frozen, I want to get everything melted. So the frozen state of this is going to slow down the cooking for a minute. And really what we're just trying to do is sort of parboil the greens. They're going to get a second cooking here once they've been run through the food process. My finger got into it. So what we're going to do now is we're going to add that terrific, what did I do with that? Shit. Okay, so now we're going to add in this caramelized onion, pepper, some garlic mixture. Oh man, it's going to be good. Put that in there. We're going to mix this all up really good. Not have to worry, we're just trying to get even heat here because this is about ready to go into the food processor. Oh, look at that, that looks delicious. We got a couple more things to add to here. One of them is we're going to want to put in a few tomatoes, and I've got some cherry tomatoes here, so I'm going to chop up just slice about 8 cherry tomatoes and put them in there because they're going to go in and get chopped up with the food processor. Tomatoes are small enough that I don't have to chop them up, and I'm not worried about anything other than just making sure it's all together here before it goes into the food processor. I'm going to turn the heat off, and we're going to get it in the food processor. You can see it's pretty full, but we don't really need to add much moisture, if any, to it because there's enough moisture in there once it gets going. Now you might ask, can you do this without a food processor? Maybe. If you had a blender and you did it in batches, probably that could work. If you had one of these small ones, you could do it in batches. But a big old Cuisinart like this is kind of need it for this dish. It's a mighty handy tool to have anyway. So we're going to go ahead and blend this and get it into a really fine paste. It's going to need some pulsing. I added about a teaspoon of salt to this. And I'm going to run this for about a minute and a half or so. We want to get it really pretty fine. So this is what it looks like pretty much when you've got it right. I mean, there's still going to be some little pieces, obviously, but you want to get it pretty fine. And look at that. Oh, it's really tasty already. Oh, it's yummy. But we're not done yet. I'm melting about a teaspoon of ghee in a fairly large pot, and then I'm going to be putting in the spinach mixture that's been pureed. Now, you could use heavy cream or half and half to put in here. I'm going to use about a third of a can, because I still have left, of coconut milk, and then I'm going to follow it up with about a third of a cup of heavy cream. Okay, so there's the mixture of the coconut milk and then some cream. Give this a nice stir. We got the heat up at just below medium. And look at that. That looks delicious. Getting all creamy. The coconut milk adds a nice sweetness to it. needs a little salt, but before I do that, I'm going to put on in some garam masala. So I put 2 heaping teaspoons of garam masala. You could put more to taste. I'm going to stir that in really well. And then I'm going to check it to see if it needs a little more salt. Get it nice and stirred up. Garam masala is going to add a lot of flavor to it. Oh man, needs a good pinch of salt. There we go. Pinch of salt. Kosher salt. I like kosher sea salt. Oh man, that looks good. Oh man. Going to cook it for about 3 or 4 minutes on low, medium low, and then it'll be put into a bowl, and the cheese will be added to it and be ready to eat later on. I went and added another about 1/3 cup of cream to this. Got nice sweetness from the caramelized onions. Just going to let it get to know itself, and then I'll take it off. Yeah, the cheese gets added in. Good cheese. And we're good. Just need to heat that up when it's time for dinner. Done.